Morning, everyone. My name is Glenn Silloway. I'm the Social Policy Director for the League of Women Voters of San Luis Obispo County. I want to welcome you to our webinar on understanding local law enforcement and immigration issues. In this webinar, we will explore one of the most important topics of our time, immigration and our civil society. We will have the next hour or up to an hour and 20 minutes if we have enough questions and the panelists are willing to stick with us. This webinar will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel and to our website in a few days. We have a plan to do a dubbed Spanish language translation, and that'll come along in about a week. For context, note that immigration is part of the League of Women Voters adopted policy-related program for this year. We kicked off the year at our opening meeting with a panel titled Our Immigrant Community Contributions and Current Challenges, that featured information and perspectives from members and activists in the immigrant community. You can find a video of this panel on our League's YouTube channel. Today's webinar is part of an important conversation in the community about the role of local law enforcement in immigration. It will speak to the issues of the day. You see them in the Tribune and on local news. It is not a definitive guide to the details of California's extensive legal framework guiding the relationship between enforcement and law enforcement and the immigrant community. If you'll bear with me just for a second, I'm going to show you through a share screen. This is a bulletin that was issued by Attorney General Bonta in January of this year. It refers to California laws that incorporate current elements of the Trust Act, the Truth Act, and the California Values Act, known as SB 54. These laws are fundamental to the issue we're talking about today, and I want you to take a look at this document if you get a chance. We'll refer to it in the closing slide as well. I'll give you a search term that'll get you right to it. And I urge you to download it and read it. It's 10 pages and it's very informative. We're fully aware that there are more voices. Sorry, I lose my cursor, switching screens. We're fully aware that there are more voices in the community on this difficult issue, in addition to those of law enforcement, and they are all important. But in this webinar, we have chosen to use our short time to inform you about how the law enforcement leaders that we have here on the screen perceive their role in this complex situation. This will not be the end of the discussion. Consistent with League practice in its educational webinars, we have disabled chat, and we will highlight the use of the Q&A function for members of the audience to engage in the current discussion. You can submit a question at any time, starting now, but we will address them only after the panel discussion is over. Please keep the questions short as possible so we can merge similar ones into a single question and avoid numbers and acronyms because not everybody knows what those are. We think there may be many questions and there's a good chance we will not get to all of them. We have in our in-person forums, we have time to collect all the questions and analyze them to consolidate and address the ones that are most likely to help. We will try to do that in this faster paced medium as well. If we get a lot of questions, we won't get to all of them, but we will save them for future review. Now, it's my honor to introduce Jim Gardiner as our moderator. Jim has been a leader in San Luis Obispo since he moved here from Newport Beach with his wife and family in 1987. The reason they moved here was for Jim to become chief of police of San Luis Obispo, where he served from 1987 to 2002. In this position, he was the chief executive of a force of 90 full-time personnel and 25 part-time or volunteer employees. He built a progressive and community-oriented department. During this whole time until today, Jim has been engaged with the community in many ways, helping to make it more inclusive and more successful. He was the primary facilitator for the Prado Day Center, leading the city and community effort that successfully created one of the largest providers of services for people experiencing homelessness in the county. More recently, he helped organize the SLO Concerned Citizens for Good Government, the organization that led the fight for the creation of an independent redistricting commission for the county to ensure that our electoral districts are as fair as possible. The League of Women Voters of SLO County actively supported this effort because free and fair elections are a core element of our mission to make democracy work. the League invited Jim to be moderator for today's panel discussion, not only for his many years of law enforcement leadership, but also for his demonstrated record of caring for everyone in our community. So let's get on to the heart of the program. Please take it away, Jim.
Thank you, Glenn. And I appreciate that very nice and warm introduction. And I appreciate the invitation to be part of this panel. It's important, and I'm honored to be here with these chiefs and the sheriff. It was over 50 years ago that I started as a police officer. And in those days, the job was pretty simple. You kept the peace and you enforced the law. Over the years, the country changed significantly, and law enforcement had to change as well. As our social infrastructure diminished, more issues like the unhoused and those with severe mental illnesses, fell to the cop on the street. At the same time, issues of social equity began to be addressed, and there were more disruptions that required law enforcement to be more in tune with the community and partner with them as well. All of this has caused law enforcement to look and act differently. Departments have become more diverse, and new community partnerships have been developed. New communication skills and a cultural understanding were expected of us by those we serve. All these changes are works in progress, and I'm glad to say that law enforcement continues to look for better ways to serve our citizens and in the country. Over the past 2 decades, the politics of the country have also changed. Unfortunately, we've become more polarized and less able to work together on many issues. The fact that our federal government is currently shutting down is the biggest example of that failure. Today, law enforcement is caught between opposing philosophies on how to deal with immigration issues, which have become so contentious. Legislation passed by federal and state agencies are often at odds with each other. Nowhere is that more evident than here in California. Those conflicts create uncertainty, mistrust, and fear for many of our community members, particularly the undocumented. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for addressing this issue head on. The complexity of our current situation is a challenge for local law enforcement. They understand the issues, are working to uphold the sworn duty to enforce the law, while at the same time serving all members of the community with fairness and compassion. I'm very pleased to introduce some leaders of local law enforcement agencies who are here with us today and who are facing that challenge on a daily basis. They are doing their best to ensure everyone is protected while they enforce the laws with fairness and discretion. First, I'd like to introduce Sheriff Ian Parkinson. Sheriff Parkinson was sworn into office in January 3rd of 2011, and after his first campaign in 2010. Parkinson's law enforcement career started in Morro Bay when he started joining it. In fact, he was under 21 when he started. He transferred to San Luis Obispo PD in 1988, where he rose to the rank of captain, second in command of the department. During his career with law enforcement, Sheriff Parkinson has performed virtually every assignment available to a police officer, including a major crime investigator, training officer, traffic officer, narcotics, field supervisor. I kept him very busy, I know that. He also assisted in directing the development of the first San Luis Obispo County regional SWAT team. Throughout his career, Sheriff Parkinson has worked both inside and outside the organization to open lines of communication with all agencies and community members. In 2022, Sheriff Parkinson ran unopposed and won his re-election to his 4th term. He was sworn in January 2023. Glad to have him here. Also really glad to have Chief Rick Scott. Rick is the Chief of Police of the City of San Luis Obispo and has nearly 30 years of law enforcement experience with a career focused on police leadership and management. He has a depth of service in progressive policing, specializing in community engagement, trust building, and collaboration. He is a graduate of the FBI National Academy. He has a master's degree from the University of Texas. He currently represents the city of SLO internationally as an IACP Mountain Pacific Region Chair for the State Association of Chiefs of Police. That's a mouthful. Okay, sorry, Rick. He's also the CPCA, that's the California Police Chiefs Association Chair for their Technology Committee. He also serves locally here on the Lumen Alliance, and he's Vice President of the Grizzly Academy Foundation. Also with us today is Chief Jim Munro. Jim is the police chief for the Grover Beach Police Department. a progressive law enforcement agency here on the Central Coast. Before joining Dover Beach PD, Jim spent 23 years with Clovis Police Department over in the Central Valley. Jim has also served many roles in his career that led him to be involved in leading a 21st century police organization with emphasis on an application of emerging technology. He's recognized as a subject matter expert in technology and serves on Rick's technology committee with the California Police Chiefs. He's also a graduate of the FBI National Academy and has a master's degree in law enforcement and public safety leadership from the University of San Diego. Also with us is Chief Dan Suttles, Chief Dan Suttles leads the Atascadero Police Department with over 2 decades of law enforcement experience, a strong record of police service, public service, and leadership and philosophy rooted in accountability, innovation, and community partnership. He assumed command in 2024, and he has focused upon operational efficiency, organizational development, and proactive community engagement. Under his leadership has enhanced service delivery. He's expanded the community action team to address homelessness, and he's established a special enforcement team to target emergency safety concerns. Before entering law enforcement, Chief Suttles was in the Marine Corps as a reconnaissance Marine. He also spent 18 years with the Glendale Police Department before becoming chief of the Bear Valley Police Department, which is up near Tehachapi, I know that. And now he's currently the chief in Atascadero. Chief Suttles also holds a master's degree in public safety from the University of San Diego. Gentlemen, glad to have you all here. Okay, the questions. After an extensive consultation with the members of the league and groups representing the most impacted immigrant population, most groups impacted by immigrant enforcement, the league has prepared 6 questions for our panel to draw out responses to issues of most concern in our communities. I'll be presenting these questions to a member of our panel and then allowing each of the other members, if they choose to also make comments on that particular question. I may also ask a clarifying question if something comes up. Once we've completed the questions, as we have time, I will ask questions for the audience, which has been explained by Glenn at the start of this webinar. So let's get started. Gentlemen, the role of law enforcement related to the civil immigration laws has changed over time. Can you explain how the value of the California Values Act, SB 54, and related court cases have defined your agency responsibility for immigrant law enforcement? And for that first question, I'd like to start with Sheriff Parkinson. Sheriff?
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and joined by 3 other amazing law enforcement agencies in the county. I want to start and explain that what we have is a very complicated system proposed to law enforcement that affects and directs us. I know we've, in the question, it highlights Senate Bill 54, but there's 2 other important parts that are contained in 54, but also are important. That is Assembly Bill 2792, which is the Truth Act, which is actually covered in I think a little later question, so I'll let that sit. The second point worth knowing is in 2014 and 2015, there were federal court rulings in regard specifically to detainers. So historically, I would say over the past 3 decades, this is my just over 4 decades in law enforcement, law enforcement has not been involved in detaining people in this country undocumented. It has been prohibited to the most part by 2 main factors. 1, policy, and 2, policy was largely driven by the fact that immigration law is very complex these days. So this is not our area of enforcement. It's a federal responsibility. So law enforcement for a long time has been prohibited from participating. SB 54 has 2 components. One that affects your average patrol personnel, and the other is the custody division known as the jail. So what 54 did was states that we only under certain circumstances could communicate with Immigration Custom Enforcement, ICE. And it's outlined very clearly what those circumstances are. But if you read the Attorney General's memo that they will provide at the end, I think you'll get a feel for how complicated it actually is in the process. And essentially what it says is that we on the custody division, that we cannot communicate with ICE for somebody in custody under an immigration unless they have been convicted of a certain list of crimes, many which are considered violent crimes. So if somebody, for an example, were to come into custody on a felony assault with a deadly weapon, and they had no prior convictions, even though they had been arrested for that charge, if they had no prior convictions for a serious exempt 54 charge, then we could not communicate with ICE. Now, the process of booking requires that everybody that comes into custody that's arrested and booked into the jail is fingerprinted for a couple reasons. Number one, to identify them. Many times we get people that don't have identification or are providing false identification, and the system allows for immediate identification of an arrestee that comes into custody. So that fingerprint that is taken is uploaded in the state and federal systems. Once that is done, the federal system will alert to the fact that they believe that somebody's coming into custody that is undocumented. They will then notify us by sending us a detainer requesting we detain. Well, the important part of that is I mentioned that the two federal case decisions in 2014 and 15 had already dictated that to honor a detention by a detainer is against the Constitution, because a detainer does not require a judicial signature. In other words, it doesn't go through the court. Because it does not go to through the court and lacks then the supported probable cause, we would be violating the Constitution by honoring it, because that person was not allowed due process, which requires the judicial portion of that process. So back in 2014 and 15, when these decisions came out, the sheriff's office, San Luis Sheriff's Office, stopped honoring those. They continued today as we receive them as notification that they would like them, but because of the law, the federal court decision, and because of SB 54, we cannot honor them. So we have to take it for file, but we cannot communicate with ICE. We cannot detain that person any longer than anybody else, unless it's determined that they have a qualifying prior offense. So essentially, when somebody says, did you honor a detainer? The answer is always no. We cannot honor a detainer. What the detainer does tell the custody folks is that this person is wanted by Immigration and Custom Enforcement. And if they do have qualifying offenses, prior convictions, then we can then communicate with them about a release date and time. However, we cannot deny them bail. We cannot hold them any longer than any other processed inmate for release. So that's kind of the long and short of the process that when somebody comes in. Now, the process of somebody that is here on current charges with prior qualifying offenses, they cannot be released by us to ICE custody until their current case is adjudicated. Now, if they bail out, yes, they could be picked up. But generally, if they remain in custody and go through the court process, and let's say they were found not guilty and released, they could be picked up. If they were found guilty, they would have to complete their sentence. In other words, if they receive county jail time for the current violation, they would have to complete that sentence until their release, and then they could be turned over to ICE. If they were convicted of a felony that's prison worthy, then they be transferred from our custody to the prison system. And if you read the Attorney General's bulletin, you'll see under 54, state prison is not under the same rules as county jails. Because of the offense they're going to prison for is a qualifier generally for an exemption from, 54. The prison system can turn that individual over after conviction, not like us, where we have to go through all the different code sections and see if whether or not it's a qualifying section. And I'll just add, not to be long-winded, but I'll add the other component now that has come into play is federal arrest warrants. A detainer is not an arrest warrant, as I mentioned, but a federal arrest warrant is, like any other magistrate has issued, that there's probable cause to take them in custody, and we have a duty and responsibility lawfully to detain that person and turn them over to ICE upon the completion of our local charges. To date, we have had about, I'm gonna look on my cheat sheet here, 13 arrest warrants for federal charges. And then we have currently in custody, so those 13 have already completed their local charges and turned over to the federal government. And currently we have 4 in custody that have arrest warrants. This is a fairly new process. I'll say it started in the last 8 months to a year, that they're obtaining judicial warrant, which qualifies for detention and release to ICE at the conclusion. So I will leave it at that, and obviously subject to follow-up questions. It's a lot of information. You'll get a lot of information throughout this entire program, I'm sure, and there might be some follow-up and clarification, which I'll allow the chief to follow up on at some point if need be.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff. I really appreciate it. Very comprehensive. What we haven't really gotten into, and I know it affects the Sheriff's Patrol officers as well as it does the other agencies, the impact of 54 on providing general services. So, Chief Scott, could you back up from there? Talk about how it affects your patrol officers.
Yeah, and before we jump into that, I just want to briefly say thank you to, of course, the Women's League of Voters, and to you, Chief Gardiner, and our whole panel here today. And I just want to sincerely thank all of our guests and people watching to be part of this discussion. And you know, from our standpoint, I think I speak for my partners. It doesn't matter where you live, how you got here, where you're from, what language you speak. Every member of our community deserves to live in peace and safety. And that is, in fact, law enforcement's role. When we talk about SB 54 specifically, you know, I've often said to many community groups, you know, it's very simple. SB 54, Truth, Trust, Values Act, it means local law enforcement has no involvement in immigration. But as this has become more real for our community, I've changed my narrative on that. And what I say now is, we are involved, and our role and responsibility is to make sure all of our community is safe. And so we do have a role. It is not enforcement and it is not immigration, but it is to interact and protect our community. And so if there are concerns that people are being threatened or people are being reportedly abducted, we have a role to at least show up, de-escalate, and try to keep the peace for everybody in our community. I will say, you know, on a broader spectrum, we have a list of partners that work with us day in and day out. And this isn't something that was created just in response to the immigration as we see it today. This is years in the making. And as you know, trust and is built on relationships. And so we've worked very diligently over the number of years, I'm sure since you were here as well, to build and form up those relationships for our community. And we have 5 distinct partners that we work with in this space. And so many of you probably already know these groups. The Mexican consulate comes and visits with us quite regularly. I know all the chiefs here have had opportunities to visit with the Mexican consulate. I have their number in my phone. I can call them if I need a resource. The Latino Outreach Council here in San Luis Obispo, extremely active. They meet once a month and put partners together. The other one is UndocuSupport here in SLO. And one of the things that I'm proud to report that our community did in particular is we got a grant from the city. We partnered with UndocuSupport and we held an immigrant outreach resource fair in our community last spring. And that brought together families and interested parties all across our community to provide information, as well as legal migration workshops, and to provide them additional resources for their families and to answer questions. And lastly, the Immigrant Support Coalition. And that's a new group that's here in our city. And we partner with them very closely on, again, sharing information and providing resources to help if there are questions happening in our community about what we're doing from a law enforcement perspective. So all that to say is we don't enforce immigration. We don't enforce civil immigration, but we do partner with our community to make sure that they feel safe. Even if there is an enforcement action, we do have a role to get involved, de-escalate, and assuage any fears that may be progressing in our community.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that. Chief Munro, how about for Grover Beach?
Yeah, I'd echo a little bit what Chief Scott said. I think that SB 54, the Values Act, to be honest with you, really hasn't changed much for us in local law enforcement. It's the same thing that we were doing prior to the act being adopted and passed. I've been in this business for a little over 25 years, and in my 25 years, immigration enforcement has never been part of my job assignment, has never been part of anybody I've worked with job assignment. And so in local law enforcement, that's never been something that we've done in my time in law enforcement, and it's probably something we will never do. Our policies dictate how we proceed every day. They're posted on probably every law enforcement agency's website. You can go and read what we can and what we can't do. And so SB 54 is a guiding light, but we're bound by our policies, our department policies, and there's nothing that we are currently doing that's much different than what we've done the last 20 years.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Chief Suttles?
All right, and again, I'd also like to thank everybody for allowing me to be here as well. I really appreciate it. It gets a representation from the north side of the county. But I am going to echo basically everything that everyone said here. And part of that question, I think it was the way it was phrased was, how does Senate Bill 54 define your agency's responsibility to your community? And quite honestly, I'm going to echo what Chief Munro just said, in that it really hasn't defined our responsibility, because what we were doing before Senate Bill 54, which is we believe that everybody in our community, regardless of their immigrant status, is that particular piece is irrelevant. Our mission is to make people feel as comfortable as possible, that if they have a need for police services, that they can call 911, they can ask for that help, and then we'll show up and we'll help them and we'll treat them with dignity and respect. That's our goal. That's what we want to do. We want to provide that blanket of peace for everyone. So that's the only thing I can really add to that question, is that I honestly don't believe that Senate Bill 54 has had much of an effect on local law enforcement, because of the way we view our mission and our responsibility to them already.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Appreciate that. Several of you touched on some of the aspects of this next question. This is question 2. How does your department work to build trust and ensure safety for all community members? And Chief Scott, you've already identified a number of collaborations that you already have. But how do you work to build trust and ensure safety for the community?
Yeah, Jim, and I think, a lot of the questions that we're going to talk about today in our responses, it has trust and partnership woven all throughout this conversation. As I mentioned, we've worked to build some of these partnerships out in the community with groups that are stepping up right now to provide that support. The other piece is that we also, on our website, for 2 things. One, our elected officials have made a resolution a number of years ago under the first administration that is still posted on our website, exactly what the city is doing and what they're not doing. In addition to that, we as the police department, partnering with our diversity, equity, and inclusion department for the city, have posted frequently asked questions. And so if you have questions, you can go to our website, as well as what the police will do and what they won't do. And it's very short. It's about 8 bullets. and in very succinct fashion talks about where we are in this space and what we will and won't do. To answer your question, I think providing this information is what builds that relationship, and building it on a foundation of truth. And anybody that has my cell number can call me or email me, and I will answer your question and provide that information as direct as I can. So we get a lot of questions: is our local police involved in an immigration action? And I will give you a direct answer. The answer is no, just looking ahead. But things happen in a very dynamic way in our community, and I want to be accessible. And so that's part of, again, that relationship building. The groups that I mentioned a little bit earlier, all those resources are also on our website. And again, there's some fantastic organizations that are doing good work. And I, encourage, I know many of our panelists are already engaged with them, but our community members to connect with them and find ways that they can build that relationship, not only with those groups, but with law enforcement moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. Chief Munro, how about Grover?
Yeah, absolutely. So in South County, Grover Beach is a very small town, about 12,500 people. So we have the ability to be in our community, maybe a little bit more than some of the other larger agencies. And we are. If you ask anybody about Grover Beach PD in 2025, we are extremely involved in the community. We do things like Coffee with the Cop. We do things like summer programs for the kids. We are, in fact, this weekend we have the Cops and Kids Field Day here in Arroyo Grande, where all these agencies that are represented here will be out there. And the reason for that is to build trust in our community. If we don't have trust as a policing law enforcement agency, you really don't have much. If your community doesn't trust you, it's not a good thing. And so, yes, the kids can come out and see all the equipment and everything, and that's a part of it. But honestly, the reason that we're out there doing these events like the one that's coming up this weekend and the many that we do over a span of a year is to have these conversations, to build that trust, to answer the questions in person. And so I encourage anybody that's watching the webinar today, please come out to one of these events in any one of our communities. A lot of times the chief executive, the sheriffs, the chiefs are there. I'll be there this weekend. We'll be able to answer any questions you may have. And so this is, a great example of just building trust in our community. I will say 25 years ago, when I started as a police officer, this whole community policing thing, it was known, but it wasn't necessarily practiced the way that it is today. Right. Every agency on this webinar is deeply embedded and involved in the community, and we keep, pushing that every single day. So here in South County, I think we're doing all right, but we keep trying to get better every day.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Chief Suttles.
Thank you.
North of the Great.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the thing that the common thread here is that communication builds trust, and that's something that I want to echo as well. And I think Chief Scott had mentioned those 5 affiliated groups that we like to communicate with, and that's really what I would push is some face-to-face communication. And I know that a lot of people in the immigrant population are not comfortable having face-to-face communication with their local law enforcement. So one thing that I encourage them to do is to reach out to somebody that they do trust, specifically within some of those affiliated groups that were listed, and a lot of them are on our websites, our police websites, so you know who they are. And you can reach out to them, and we have these relationships with them so that your questions and your message that you think is important for us to hear can get to us, and these levels of communication can take place, through those affiliated groups as well. But yeah, I agree with everything that the other chief says, and that the communication builds trust, and trust builds peace, and that's all I got for that.
Okay, thanks, Chief. Appreciate it. Sheriff, how about the SO?
I like that ending, Chief. So I want to start just say that the sheriff's office probably serves the largest Hispanic demographic throughout the entire county. We have services up in North County. We have services in South County, where predominantly our Hispanic populations are. Difficult population to reach at times out of fear, as Chief Suttles just said. So for us, it starts with communication. We're very fortunate that when I came into office, we had under probably 12 Spanish-speaking employees. Today, we have over 65 Spanish-speaking employees, and then throughout the organization, so either in communications and patrol, in custody. And the idea is one, sometimes you need Spanish speakers to be able to communicate. Two, also spreading the word that it is really important not to fear local law enforcement. We have also met with the same groups as previously referenced in regards to their mission, their concerns, their fear, and how do we get this word out to them. I can go back 10 years ago. We did a Halloween event down in Oceano geared toward the Hispanic community. And we had a decent turnout, but there was still a lot of fear back then, and that was prior to the Trust and Truth Act. So what we're working on right now is really two directions. The undersheriff is leading the charge that has formed an interior working group, largely made up of our Spanish speakers. And when I mention Spanish speakers, we have a lot of those Spanish speakers that are either first generation or second generation U.S. citizens. So they're very familiar with the fear in the community. Largely their families still speak predominantly Spanish. But how do we reach those groups? How do we quell their fears for what we're doing when they've been victimized by a crime? Because all of us agree that what we don't want is somebody calling in after being the victim of a crime in fear that local law enforcement is going to take them into custody for their immigration status, which we're prohibited from even asking. So what the group's focus is going to be working with these local organizations. We've met with them. We received their questions and concerns. And what we're formulating is two things. Number one, similar to what Chief Scott said, having a posted document in multiple languages, Aztecan, which is a common language now being spoken, particularly in our areas, two in Spanish, that delivers a message of what we're talking about now. I was happy to hear that this is going to be translated into Spanish for release, but we want them to hear it from our people in the department and hopefully produce numerous videos in different languages that we can publish. Because if I had a forum today inviting this population, it would probably be pretty sparse attendees because of that fear. So we brainstorm with these groups of how can we get that message out without that fear, and that is simply give them access to it without having to feel they have to put themselves in jeopardy. So we're in the process of that now, and we will be working with them to craft exactly the things in these areas we want to know. And the last thing I'll mention is that we definitely have a lot of community events. Chief Munro mentioned Cops and Kids. We've had Family Day for almost 3 decades now, that we invite families, and we get a range of people coming to that event. They're comfortable coming because they've come for so long. The other thing we do is what we've called Sheriff's Summer Camp. We host a week-long summer camp, typically in 3 different parts of the county. I'll mention North County just as an example. We have it that we invite residents of Shandon, residents of San Miguel, residents of Paso Robles and Templeton to bring kids together from different kind of cultural backgrounds, I say, different environmental backgrounds. And the camp is about teaching lessons and uniting people. As we know, we do a pretty darn good job of keeping gangs out of the area. Gangs are largely territorial. The idea is to introduce them to other kids in other communities so we can break down those territorial walls and teach them life skills that will help them use their words instead of violence. And the idea is to bring them together. And then lastly, I'll mention that we have sent many of our Spanish-speaking deputies and my North Station commander to different forums and different events that can introduce themselves, introduce the Hispanic population that we have employed at the sheriff's office to try to break down those barriers and walls.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff. The third question. Observers report that Homeland Security officers sometimes make arrests without identifying themselves as law enforcement agents. Do local law enforcement agencies have the authority to request identification of agents who do this? If a community member is unsure if someone is in law enforcement, ICE, or an impersonator, should they call a local law enforcement agency? And to start that discussion, Chief Munro.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. So yeah, that question is kind of a loaded question. With the federal agencies, they don't have the same rules that we have here in California. As you will, excuse me, always see that any uniformed officer in California will have a badge and a nameplate of some sort with at least first initial, last name. Federal agents are typically required to identify themselves when they're out making arrests. And per the Code of Federal Regulations, they actually say that they're supposed to do that as soon as possible and when it's safe. And so I think, you know, that could be up to interpretation for each federal agents out there, like when is it safe to do that? And that may be potentially why they're not providing it right away. We as law enforcement, local law enforcement, can definitely ask for their ID, and we have the authority to do that if someone's got a gun and a badge on. There have been examples here in California of someone, you know, pretending to be a federal agent, and we've never had any problem with that. I think all the chiefs and the sheriff would agree that anytime a real federal agent is asked to identify themselves, if we've ever had to do that in an official manner, there's no issue with that. We have, you know, good relationships with all of our federal agencies. I will say, for those that are watching, what we have seen out there is your local law enforcement agencies. So Atascadero, San Luis PD, Grover Beach PD, and the sheriff's office. We also have plain cars out there. We have plainclothes detectives out there. And a lot of times they look very similar to maybe what the federal agents are wearing, in maybe a vest, jeans, and a pistol. The difference is our agencies, they will always have a badge of some sort, a nameplate of some sort, and typically it'll just say sheriff or police on the back with maybe sometimes the agency name. So I just want the public to understand that, because we had this happen in Grover Beach a couple weeks ago where some of our plainclothes detectives were mistaken for ICE, and that was the first question they were asked. And our detectives very quickly said, no, we are not ICE. We are the Grover Beach Police Department. We're out here trying to help our uniformed officers. So if anybody ever has any questions about whether or not someone is a real police officer, a real federal agent, I speak for all the law enforcement leaders on this webinar. You can call us. Call the Grover Beach Police Department anytime. We will respond. We will try and figure that out. We will try and make sure the identities are correct, and that's what we're here to do. So hopefully that answered that question.
Okay, thank you. Chief Suttles, anything to add?
Yes, thank you. You know, I think the one thing I really want to echo from Chief Munro is a simple fact that if somebody calls our dispatch and says they have something that's happening, we are going to respond. You know, I think that's one of the things that I hear a lot is that when they're talking about this specific subject, when they're talking about whether or not police officers will come out and identify some of these individuals that may be not identifying themselves, is, you know, hey, are you going to come and are you going to help us? That is what we're here for. That is what we do. We are going to respond to all calls. Something that I think is really important to keep in mind for this audience is, you know, what is our goal, you know, as local law enforcement? And that is that we want to keep the peace. And I think that that's important to keep in mind, because when that officer or those officers respond to that call and they are initially getting on scene, the first thing that a police officer is going to do is try to identify what the disturbance is and try to bring peace to that disturbance. In other words, if there's a lot of people yelling at each other, the first thing they're going to do is try to get everybody to calm down. It's not what they're not going to do is listen to somebody yelling in their ear that I want that person identified. Because the cops are going to turn around and say, I need you to calm down. And that's where a lot of confusion can happen. So I think that it's really important for people to understand what exactly our mission is, and that's to keep the peace. So those responding officers will do that. They will identify. They will help people understand what is going on if there's a confusion. But the first thing that the officers are going to do is get around that corner when they arrive, and they're going to try to keep the peace. If it appears that there is a group of protesters, or we don't know that, we just see a group of people that it turns out that they're protesting, but they look like they're aggressive, guess what? Those are the people we're going to tell to calm down. We want them to be calm. If it's vice versa, we want to calm the other side down first. We want to calm everybody down first. That's our goal, that's our mission. And then once everybody's calm, and then they start asking us, well, we'd like to identify these individuals. That's fine. We can help you with that. But for me, that's the most important part, that I want people to understand exactly what's going to happen when you call the police officer. We're going to come help you, but we're going to try to get everybody to be calm first.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Sheriff?
I think the chiefs did a great job of covering most of
Okay.
this, but I'll just add something. As I believe Chief Munro mentioned about plainclothes, the question often comes up is why would your officers be in plainclothes affecting an arrest? And I'll tell you, it's safety to the arrestee, there's safety to the public, and safety to the investigators. If that person that they're arresting or going after is believed to often carry a weapon, an announcement pre-hand or in uniform could cause an immediate negative reaction, meaning a shooting, something really bad. And so we have a duty to protect the public. We have a duty to protect the suspect, and we have a duty to protect our deputies. So those those types of arrests are key to that protection. However, back to the original portion of the question, they have a duty to respond. Duty to identify themselves immediately. We teach them that, they practice it, because if any of us was walking down the street and we were accosted by people that were in plain clothes, we would think that we are becoming a victim of a crime. So it's imperative by law to identify themselves immediately as deputy sheriffs or police officers, and present, as Chief Munro said, a badge and form of identification as soon as possible. But what we don't want our plainclothes people doing is accosting somebody without telling them who they are and that they're under arrest. Those are two really key factors. I can't vouch for what the feds do because I've never been present, and we have no control over what they are trained and told to do. But speaking from our position, and I'll echo what was said lastly, is that if in doubt, and I've said this repeatedly to several groups, if there's a doubt, call us immediately. We will identify them because they have a duty to identify themselves to us upon request. And if they're already gone, I can tell you personally, and I'm sure the other chiefs feel the same, we'll make a call to ICE and find out if that was their agents. And trust me, when I say, from me, I will make it very clear that I'm not happy that they're arresting people without identifying themselves or giving any type of explanation, because it's not the proper way to do business as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, thank you. How do you feel about it, Sheriff? That comes through really strong, and it does represent the anger I think many law enforcement feel about when those things occur. Chief Scott, anything else to add on to that?
Yeah, my colleagues absolutely did a great job on that question. I did drop in the chat, so I put it's 8 CFR 287 is the requirement to identify by federal agents. I've seen the same YouTube channel videos that everyone else has where they're not doing that, but there is a duty under their requirements to identify when it's safe to do so. A community member can ask them for identification. I can understand why people may be apprehensive to do that. So just as my colleague said, call us. We're happy to come out and do that because they likely, issuances, they will identify to us. And so we're happy to perform that. I have that information up on our website as well. The last piece I want to touch on that Chief Suttles mentioned, we do have officers operating in plainclothes out in the community as well, like the other departments. However, when we move to an enforcement action, we try almost exclusively to have a marked unit there when we're doing enforcement so people can see the police car and they know who to call if there is a problem. So we try that. It's not always 100%, but we try our very best to have a marked unit when we move to enforcement. That's all I'll add on that.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. This question, and I think the fourth question I have has been covered in a couple different ways, but let me ask you if any of you want to elaborate. Does your department have any online public resources on this topic? I'm assuming immigration is what we're talking about, that people should know about. And let's see, Chief Suttles, is there anything that you didn't cover? Yeah, you talked to.
You know what? The only thing I'll say is that it's a work in progress, and I'm actually learning as we go. As a matter of fact, I
Okay.
just wrote down a note. Chief Scott just mentioned the requirement, the statute for the requirement to identify. I think that would be an important piece of information for me to add to our frequently asked questions section within our website. So it's a work in progress. I also am looking forward to the sheriff making those videos, as I'll try to steal those too. And put
Okay.
those up on our website as well. So yeah, we want to have this information available to people. We want to be able to communicate, whether it's in face to face, or if it's on our website, or if it's through an affiliate group, whatever that is. Communication is our goal.
Okay. Sheriff, you mentioned a couple things already that you've done. Anything you want to add on it?
Yeah, I'll just add that we are in the process of producing that, but I'll also add that and this is the case with all of us. We have our policies posted on our website. It's required under our custody policy, policy 240. If you want to look it up on our website, it covers our procedure in dealing with ICE in the custody environment. So they can see what we do, what our responsibility is. And on the patrol side is policy 428. If you pull up those manuals, you'll find those sections and you can read the policies themselves. We believe in the policies, we follow the policies. If we determine that somebody is not following the policy, we do take immediate action and turn it over to our internal affairs unit to investigate and take action, because we train on those policies. They have requirements to train on the policies, and it's made public so the public understands what our rules are. So I would encourage for any of our agencies, they are posted and they can go to our websites and find those policies pertaining to this topic.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sheriff. And Chief Scott, anything else to add on that?
Yeah, I think the sheriff makes a good point when we talk about our policies being public, and transparency, again, is so key to maintaining and improving our relationships. I think most all of our departments, it's part of the law that we have all of our policies posted. I mentioned earlier that our council, has a statement that's online regarding this issue. In addition, we have the frequently asked question forum. We're very fortunate. We have a very strong department within the city for diversity, equity, and inclusion. They were way out front on this issue. They have an entire webpage that's dedicated to immigration resources for the city. We also provide those resources in Spanish as well for Spanish speakers. The last piece, again, I just can't overemphasize the relationship with SLO on DocuSupport. They've been a great partner for us in figuring out ways to get information out to the community, as well as give us feedback on how we're doing. Two other online resources, the immigration, I think it's called the Immigration Resources page under the county. So the county actually has a page out there about Know Your Rights, which is posted on their website. And then again, DocuSupport has a long list of different services posted on their webpage, and we link to that as well.
Great. Thank you, Chief. Chief Munro, anything else?
No, I think my colleagues did a great job covering the resources.
Okay.
We have the same ones available on our website. Thank you.
Okay. I think this one's going to go back to the sheriff. Question number 5. When would a local law enforcement agency be authorized to transfer a person to ICE for a civil immigration violation? And under what circumstances is a person transferred from the county jail to Homeland Security? I know you covered a bit of that in the opening.
Okay, I'm going to try not to be long-winded again. I apologize, but these are very complicated issues. Number one, we're governed by 54. I've already covered what a detainer means. It means virtually nothing other than notification to us that we know they are interested in that person. It requires, first of all, a prior conviction, and I'm going to give you examples of some of the I believe we have released 21 people to ICE. And I want to read just to give you a flavor for what some of the charges are. And again, prior convictions, not the current charge, that's irrelevant. It's only prior convictions. So assault with a deadly weapon, possession of a dangerous weapon and arson, felony evading arrest, domestic violence, false imprisonment, sales of narcotics, criminal threats, felony hit and run and vehicular manslaughter, and felony vandalism. So those are examples of the charges that are covered under SB 54. Now, the big question here is why? Because under the civil immigration, we can't turn them over to ICE. We can't communicate with them about it. We can't inquire about it, period. What we do, and prior to 54, what used to happen is ICE would come in to the jail, normally in 2 to 3 days a week, and they would interview particular people they are interested in, because just because their fingerprints came back to something, they need to do further investigation. Well, that was stopped with the first act that I mentioned in opening, the Truth Act. That requires that if ICE comes to the jail and they want to, where's my numbers? If ICE comes to the jail and they want to interview an inmate or an incarcerated person, what we have to do, our responsibility is go to that incarcerated person and ask them whether or not they want to interview with ICE. Year to date, we have had 8 of those cases happen. Out of those cases, we've had 1 that chose to interview with them. Then there was no detainer placed on that individual. So obviously they cleared up that person was not undocumented. And the second one was they came under, I'll say, under a mental health crisis. They agreed, but we did not allow that interview due to their crisis they were having. So they are asking, we have a responsibility to not only admonish them on that, but they actually have to sign a form that's it's in both English and Spanish, that says, yes, they're willing to, or no, they are not willing to have that conversation. In regards to the turning over of people that have prior violent offenses that are exempt from 54, we communicate with them. We arrange for them to come into our secured Sallyport Park. They do not come into our facility. They wait in the parking lot, and we turn them over inside the secured portion of the facility. The big question is, okay, why release these violent offenders? One, obvious, our mission is to protect our community. If we have people that had prior violent offenses, releasing them back in the community is not keeping our community safe as far as I'm concerned. Second, if it's exempt from 54, if it's a violent crime covered in 54 that exempts it, I believe we have a responsibility to respond to the federal government and comply with their requests. And then also we have the issue of protecting families that we're putting these violent offenders back in with the families, and that's a great concern for us. And lastly, and this is to me the single most important reason, what 54 did for the jails is it made it very difficult for us to turn those people over to ICE, and the concern is that they know they're in custody for a violent offense, and if we were to release them in the community, ICE is going to go into our community. In case you haven't seen national news, which I'm sure everybody has, they're going into the communities and they're after 1 or 2 people in a location, and they find 10 other undocumented people living at that location in apartment buildings, houses, what have you. And if they're undocumented, whether they've committed any other crime other than potentially a civil immigration issue, they get picked up. It's not safe for people to go into a community like that, and B, I don't know that it's the fair thing to do. And I have a responsibility to protect our communities as well as the facility and any portion of the population. So I think that's why we do it. That's why it's so important.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff. I'm going to take the moderator's prerogative here. We have our first question that came in from people outside, and it kind of relates to this. As they're talking about the jail, if the sheriff's office does not inform ICE of an inmate's release date and time, could ICE use public records to find out when that inmate will be released? And if so, what records?
That's actually a great question. Yes, the short answer is yes. And how? First of all, we have historically, and most all sheriff's department have what's called inmate finder, and that is that they're looking to find out if an inmate is in custody. They go online to our website and they can put a name in, and it'll show whether or not they're in custody. If they're a sentenced inmate, with the time, it'll actually indicate how much time they are serving before release. A couple reasons. One, victims want to know. Number two, it's public information that we supply. The second method is through the courts. The courts are public information. I could go in there and I'll pick on Chief Gardiner. I can go in and ask cases with Chief Gardiner and find out details. The court publishes the court dockets, and the court hearings, oftentimes are open to the public unless it's been restricted. So many times ICE can have that information simply through documents produced by the court, not us. We do not publish release dates. And I'll just mention this because it pertains to this. We do not have release times. We do not publish release times because we end up releasing throughout the day. If, for example, if a incarcerated person is taken to court in the morning and the judge releases that person at some point, they return to the jail, they're processed and released. We never know when that is. If they're in for a non-retainable offense, such as a drunken public or DUI, unless they have disqualifying OR criteria such as priors or failure to appear, things like that, they typically will stay for 4 to 5 hours until they are deemed to be sober, and then they'll be released on a notice to appear. So they're released at all times of day, and we specifically do not have a time of release in advance, nor do we typically give that information out.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff. Appreciate it. Again, I'm going to take my prerogative here. The last question ties in with one that just came in from the outside of the public. Media reports have indicated that possible ICE agents have been seen in the vicinity of the SLO courthouse where local police gather. Does this mean local law enforcement is working with ICE? The outside question says, ICE continues to use police vests, making it hard to differentiate between local law enforcement and ICE. Trust is hard to build. Are your teams promoting any other visible clues to know that the community is they're not interacting with local police versus ICE? Is this being shared through communication channels? And I believe a couple of you covered some of that. Chief Scott, I want to start with you since the courthouse is in San Luis.
Yeah, I'll just say, to kind of start with the question that was entered is, all of our officers wear this for the most part. 99% of our officers look like this. It's a standard uniform, badge, nameplate. That's what we generally look like when we're operating in the community, and we always proactively identify ourselves when we're investigating a crime or making an arrest. When we talk about the courthouse specifically, yes, the county courthouse is in the city of SLO. The courthouse proper is the county's property. However, we've heard about operations at the courthouse where ICE agents were outside the courthouse and picked up people who were eventually deported. I know of 2 incidents where that did occur. A couple of things: the police department, SLO Police Department here in the city, and I believe I speak for the county as well, and the sheriff. Neither one of our agencies were notified that that operation was pending or coming. And so we did not have any resources that were allocated to support that operation, nor would we. Part of SB 54 is we don't participate in their operation and we don't impede their operation. But in those two instances that I'm aware of, which I found out after the fact, SLO PD was not at all involved in either one of those cases. In fact, and I think it was even in the media, there was a video of a police car reportedly escorting an ICE agent out of the area. The media since responded with an apology and retraction that that was not the case. The courthouse is full of police officers from all different agencies. And in fact, that police officer that was in the media was not a SLO police officer. They were in fact having lunch. And so that was not the case. But it just reaffirms, if you see something in the public that you have a question about, call the police department. If it's an ICE agent sitting there or contacting someone, call us. We're happy to come out and de-escalate, ask for identification. And again, just make sure that everyone is safe and we're maintaining the peace. But we have no formal arrangements or informal arrangements to work with any agencies, ICE, DHS, or the others at our courthouse.
Okay. Chief Munro?
I don't have a courthouse other than the traffic court here in Grover Beach, so it doesn't typically apply. We have not seen ICE at our traffic court.
Yeah, the ID issues, I folded that in there too. I believe you took a position on that earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we covered that in the earlier question. And
okay.
Like you said, anytime anybody has a question, call your locals and we will come out and try and verify.
Okay, and Chief Suttles?
Yeah, the person who posted that question also asked about the confusion and identifying. I find that frustrating as well, that a federal agent would have police written on the back of their vest. I find that frustrating personally because I believe that it does confuse the issue. But then Chief Scott also brought up the mention of a police officer that was seen, that was videotaped outside the courthouse, that initially they thought that that person was trying to assist with ICE. That was us. That was Atascadero. And as Chief Scott had mentioned, turned out that that individual was my officer was coming back from lunch. I think it's important for people to understand, why is it that police officers throughout the entire county will be at the courthouse so much? Well, police officers, a lot of times are subpoenaed to come to court to testify. So when we arrest somebody and we have to testify in that person's arraignments or in their preliminary trials. So it is on a day-to-day basis. If you were to go sit outside of a courthouse, you will see a lot of police officers from all over the county coming down there. So just because you see them there doesn't mean that they, just because you see them there and then you also see ICE there doesn't mean they're working together. It's just that we have to be there because we have a court order to be there. But, for us, that actually led to a good thing. Like I was talking about earlier, one of my goals is to try to have face-to-face communication with as many people as I can. And when the media covered that incident, when the videotaping happened, I was able to sit down with somebody from one of these affiliated groups. I think it's 805 UnDocuFund, a young man named Cesar Vasquez. And I sat down with him, and he was quoted in the Tribune, I believe it was, regarding this incident. And since then, he and I have had a chance to sit down. He's a very impressive young man. He's only 17 years old, and he's already a leader amongst his peers. I told him as much. But the point is that this gave us an opportunity to sit down and discuss this, and for him to ask me the questions and why were we there and what transpired. And it also allowed me to have an opportunity to talk to somebody that is representing so many other people that, again, may not feel comfortable coming directly to me or any police officer for that matter to ask questions to. So these incidents, they happen. I think it's important to remember that there's always an opportunity to make good out of them. And that's exactly what we've been doing.
Okay, thank you. Another outside question. Sheriff, I think you just covered most of this, but I want to read it since it was presented to us. For the sheriff, we hear you're not honoring detainers, but you are still releasing folks into your lobby where ICE is picking them up in a timely manner, which in practice is the same action SB 54 is trying to stop. What protections are you giving to our undocumented neighbors? Is there anything that you didn't already cover? what your practice is?
Well, two things I want to make really clear, and I think the previous question needed to be added, that regarding our identification, part of our working group is looking at identifying all local law enforcement and vehicles so people readily recognize them if they don't. If they're visiting into another city, they recognize the difference. In regards to the jail and the courthouse, two things. We have no authority to keep anybody out of a public open facility. None of us do. So all of our releases, as I mentioned earlier, are released throughout the day. We do not notify ICE on any arrestee in custody that we are turning over to ICE. That is done in our secure environment. We have one release area, and that is our lobby. People come in and out of there. ICE has been there on occasion without our knowledge at early on, and identifying people as they come out that they're interested in. The number is small. As a matter of fact, there was a report this last weekend of them being out there in our parking lot. To our knowledge, not a single person released during that time was detained by ICE, nor do we know at this point that they had any pending detention requests. So there was no correlation between that. But I want to mention one other thing in regards to that, because the same applies to the courthouse. It's a public location. The arrest that Chief Scott mentioned, actually, when that occurred, they were plainclothes ICE agents arresting that individual out in front of the courthouse. My deputies in the courthouse actually heard the commotion and responded out to the arrest scene. They didn't know they were ICE agents arresting this gentleman. After the situation got solved, I can tell you I made a phone call to the ICE supervisor, quite upset because it could have ended in a very tragic situation. And I'm not talking about the identification. I don't know if they identify themselves. But when you have uniformed personnel coming out and you see a scuffle on the sidewalk, that's not a good thing to be walking into, especially when those plainclothes people are armed. And so we made it perfectly clear that we did not want to ever happen again. We can't control that. We can't control if they show up out in our parking lot at the jail. It's not happening, I would say, on a regular basis. But at least now the understanding that I have from ICE is that if they are going to be at a location, they will notify us they have agents in the area. And at least we know. We have no idea who they're after, particularly with the traffic the courthouse produces. And we have no other way of releasing people other than it's a sporadic release throughout the day. And those published or those releases are not published what time that person's getting out. So they could sit out there for 3 hours outside the courtroom or outside the jail. There's nothing we can lawfully do about it. And there was certainly no assistance being provided from my agency to them to notify them of somebody coming out, because we only are focused on the SB 54 exempt charges, and those are done under a controlled situation, not in the public lobby.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff. There's got one more question coming up, but I want to pose this to all of you. The frustration of local law enforcement of having to deal with problems of ICE. The question comes up, says, does any law enforcement agency in SLO County share automated license plate recognition data or data from any other surveillance systems with DHS or other federal agencies? I don't know anybody here who's got the automated system, so.
I'll start with that. We have
Jim?
17 cameras. Yeah, we have 17 cameras in our city. We do not share with the federal government at all. In fact, we don't share outside the state of California.
Okay. Chief Scott?
Yeah, same here, San Luis Obispo. We have automated license plate readers downtown and also fixed cameras. We do not share that information out to federal agents.
That's good to know now that I'm parking down in San Luis. Appreciate it. Thank you. Chief Suttles?
We don't have any Alper systems.
Okay, and Sheriff?
We have them all over the county in various areas, but we do not share with federal partners. And as Chief Munro stated, we do not share out of state either.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any ongoing communication? This is just my question. Is there any ongoing communication between CJAA, which is the County Criminal Justice Administrators Association, and ICE? We have somebody we can talk to?
So it's a great question, Jim. I'm the current chair this year for CJA.
Thank you.
Which is a representative of all of our chiefs in the county, as well as our sheriff. We have corrections, probations at the table. The FBI is part of that as well. Short answer is no. Myself as the chair do not have any communication with ICE or DHS directly. In fact, I've tried to get information before on the courthouse incident in particular. Kind of hit a brick wall. I couldn't get any information my direction either. But no, there is no ongoing communication between those two groups specifically. Obviously, the sheriff has, his role is a bit differently. So I know that they've probably worked something out with courthouse property, but not CJAA proper.
Okay. Another question just came in. This is the next to last question.
Hey, Chief,
Yes,
before
sir.
you say that, can I just add something to that
Go
real
ahead.
quick? I have had communication with the director of ICE out of Los Angeles, specifically related to their conduct and behavior, not related to cases, but the courthouse was an example. We've had some incidents where we don't believe that they treating our employees seeking information was appropriate. We have reached out to them to correct behavior, particularly in the area of officer safety, as I mentioned with the courthouse. And so I have had a conversation on the state sheriff's level. We have had in our quarterly meetings, an ICE executive come to the meeting to discuss not ICE operations, but their direction. And then all the sheriffs, 58 sheriffs in California, all of our concern with some of the actions that are being taken and some of the concerns that were expressed today. So I can assure you that you have 58 sheriffs that are giving them an earful when there's something that are occurring in our jurisdiction that we have not been happy with. So they're well aware when something comes up that when they're coming to the meeting, they're going to hear from us.
Okay, thank you. That makes me feel really good. I serve as a former chief. Thank you. I know you guys got some teeth. Okay, last question here is, and I'm not familiar with this at all. When will SLO County schedule a Truth Act forum regarding a rearrest in 2024? Is that familiar to anybody?
That's me.
Okay.
Yeah. Our plan is to schedule either November or December. We'll give plenty of pre-notice where we'll report our numbers, our contacts as required. But typically we do that November, December, and we're actually planning it now. We have not put it on the calendar, but we will give plenty of advance notice that we're going to have that presentation. That's my requirement,
Okay.
not the chief's.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, gentlemen, that's we have to put a hard stop on this now. Again, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for presenting this important seminar. Most importantly, I hope everyone had a chance to listen to these three chiefs and the sheriff. They represent the law enforcement leadership of this county. Every one of them is committed to you, that their agency is open, available, and want to earn your trust and confidence in any way, shape, or form we can, whether it's immigration or anything else. I'm proud to say that I was part of their group. Thank you, gentlemen. And Glenn, I'm going to give it back to you.
Thank you very much. You guys can all turn off your microphones and your cameras. You did a fantastic job. We really appreciate you being here. And obviously, Jim Gardiner, thank you for managing this so well.
Thank you.
I got a couple last minute things to say. This webinar is something that will be part of an ongoing program for us. If you have ideas or suggestions for further events, please send them to us. I think on the closing screen, you'll see the email again, socialpolicy@lwvslo.org. Use that to send us things. Please remember that the end slide has a short term that will give you the Attorney General's bulletin. You can see it there on the right. I highly recommend it. If you search AG Bonta Bulletin 2025 DLE 03, you should find it directly. We'll keep that on the screen here for a minute. Thanks to everybody. I appreciate your attendance, your questions, your time, and your information. We hope to see you again soon at lunch with the League. All for now. Thank you for being here. Bye.